Good evening, everyone. My name is Darsh Singh, and I'm honored to welcome you all here for tonight for the Interfaith Summit. Thank you for joining us. Before we begin, just a few quick notes. Please silence your phones. Restrooms are located outside to the right. If you need help at any point, our volunteers will be happy to assist you. We're grateful to be joined this evening by Mayor Ron Nirenberg, who will be leading our conversation with our distinguished panel of guests. Let me briefly introduce them to you. Rachel Rustin Henson is a Houston native and a member of Congregation Agudas Achim and Temple Bethel. She currently serves as a Jewish engagement specialist at the Barshop Jewish Community Center. Jordan Galvan, a Mescalero Apache descendant and a member of the Am spiritual group, is a community-driven advocate. She currently serves as a development and communications coordinator for American Indians in Texas at the Spanish colonial missions. Antonio Frietes is a lifelong San Antonioan and Roman Catholic. He currently serves as Director of Continuing Education at Oblate School of Theology, as well as its designated liaison to the Interfaith community of San Antonio. Mustafa Safak is a native of Istanbul and who has called San Antonio home since 2007. He is one of the founders of Raindrop Community Center and has served as the former board chair of Raindrop Foundation San Antonio, a Hizmet Muslim organization. And last but not least, Mayor Ron Nirenberg's first official act in 2017 was to declare San Antonio a compassionate city by signing the Charter for Compassion. We are deeply grateful for his 8 years of service to our city and honored by his presence this evening. After the panel is finished, we will have an opportunity to respond to your questions and comments. Please write them on the note cards provided and turn them into volunteers when directed. And now, to open our evening in the right spirit, I'd like to invite Reverend Jessica Kemp, a native of Little Rock, Arkansas, and a long-term San Antonioan who serves as a minister of children, youth, and young adults at Antioch Missionary Baptist Church, to offer an invocation.
Y'all had faith in me in these heels. Pray with me. Divine Holy One, your goodness is beyond comprehension, and we come together as your people. Different traditions, diverse expressions, but still as one. Go before us as we pursue justice. Walk with us as we push toward equality. Reside inside of us as we press our way toward a brighter tomorrow. Bless our time together. Light our way and allow the words of our mouth to be acceptable in thy sight. We love you, God. We magnify your name and we lift you on high. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Kemp, for that grounding moment. And now, to begin tonight's conversation, please welcome Mayor Ron Nirenberg.
Good evening, everyone. Well, thank you all for being here this evening. It is our Interfaith Summit, and it's happening on June 5th, 2025, which means that in about 12 days, there will be some new leadership in City Hall. But it's a bit of a bookend for me because, as was mentioned, on the first day I took office in 2017, our city passed a resolution unanimously to join among the cities of the world in the Charter for Compassion. And we signed that charter as my first official signature as mayor. And so over the last 8 years, people in this room have been dedicated to the work of compassion and action. And we have demonstrated that in many ways in our city. And we've built upon that through our policies and our plans. And I'm quite proud of that during my tenure. All of it has been done through the partnership of the people in this room. So thank you for being part of that during our journey. To our Interfaith Coalition, we are very grateful for your leadership. And I want to also tip my hat to Ann Helmke, Reverend Ann Helmke, who is our city's first faith liaison, who has been the director of that effort. So we're joined by a distinguished panel, and our goal here is to have a very organic and informative conversation that kind of navigates the space that we're in, which is a space of transition. It's also one of a lot of cross currents culturally and politically in our world that kind of test and cut to the core of compassion. And so I'm going to start my my prompts, because we are here to listen to an informed conversation from these four incredible leaders. And so I'm going to start by saying to all of you, you have a great handout here, and I'm going to refer to it a couple of times. But one of the things that is evident in our work in compassion is that it's a universal principle. In fact, we say it's the essential component of the human DNA. And compassion essentially can break down to the ethic of reciprocity, which is the golden rule. Treat other people the way you would want to be treated, and don't treat other people the way you wouldn't. It's found in all of the traditions of the world, culturally and in faith. And so I want to reflect on that for a moment. It's in the handout, and I would encourage you to take a look at that. Tonight, though, history noted, and all of the current events included, I'm curious about where and how each of our panelists see compassion happening in the world. Again, compassion different than empathy, which is a passive state of mind. Compassion is action. And so I'm asking you all now, and there's no order. And I've instructed them all to interrupt each other and to have an organic conversation, no time limits, but let's have a conversation that we get to overhear. Where do you see and how do you see compassion happening in our world? And if you can give some specific examples, that would be great. And if there can be some in San Antonio, that would be even better. So I leave that right in the middle, and whoever wants to take it first is welcome to do so. Jordan.
Shout out to everybody. Is it there? There it goes. Okay. Compassion, right? Compassion is something within the Native community that extends beyond just the concept itself. It's a living, breathing movement. It's a philosophy. It's a way of life, right? You know, compassion looks like being there for one another every step of the way, not in the sense of I understand where you're coming from, but I understand you. And I feel your pain, and I feel you, and I feel your joy, and I feel everything that you feel, because we are interconnected together, right? Lakesh and Lakin. I am you and you are me, and you are my other half. So what happens to you happens to me, and it happens to our whole community. And so when we tap into our own, we also tap into the experiences that we share, not only in this present moment, but 7 generations further down the line. And sorry. Is it there? Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
We've got
Appreciate it.
4
All right.
mics and a lapel, so we're going to be good. So just
So when I think about compassion and specific examples of that within the indigenous community here in San Antonio, this is Yanawana. This is the land of the spirit waters, right? There's many Native people and different groups represented here. I come from Mescalero Apache people, but we also have to recognize the Tapilam Coitecan Nation, which is our First Nation here. And the way that comes together, right? Like, let's say one of our community members is going through an extremely difficult time, whether it be mentally, emotionally, spiritually, financially, tangibly, whatever it may be. Our community believes in gathering around that person and putting forth that energy all together to share that united space, to allow that healing and to allow for vulnerable spaces to share on the things that you're going through and hear from the elders and the wisdom keepers around you, and how can I be of service to you? What can I do to pour into your cup? Because by pouring into your cup, it's our cup, right? We all, water is sacred, water is life, but water is also energy, and energy comes with that responsibility. So compassion, you know, we had a community member not that long ago go through several
Your
Let's try
energy's
this one.
knocking out the mic.
Otherwise, I'll just yell at y'all. No, I'm just kidding. But, you know, we had a community member that had been experiencing a significant amount of different hardships back to back. You know, sometimes when it rains, it pours. But I'm going to sit right there with you, and the rain is going to get on me, and we're going to both be wet in this rain together, because that's what community does. And so we gather around them. We prayed for them. We had held ceremony for them. Ceremony is our number one reminder of compassion, because it's taking away the distractions of the modernized world and allowing energy to flow where energy is meant to be, and that's with one another. And so in ceremony, we were able to provide our own stories and our own experiences, but also allow that person to feel and to express themselves, and to really vulnerably listen to them and the things that they need, right? Whether that's cooking for you, showing up every day, making sure you can get to work, being there hand in hand, supporting you by doing a fundraiser, whatever it may be, right? It's being there, and it's allowing the person that is experiencing that hardship tell you what they need, and to listen to that with humility. And so I would say that that's a very good example of what compassion looks like within our community. It's the way that we live and breathe this. We carry it every day, every step of the way. Compassion isn't just a concept; it's a way of life, and it's a really huge part of who we are as Indigenous people.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jordan. All right, she just really kind of packaged it for you. So give us some examples. I don't think your concept of compassion, sort of the pouring in of the cup and participation in the other the trauma collectively, which has the benefit of sharing the burden, is probably different than many of you probably experience. Maybe you describe it differently, but so let's go from that. That's a pretty, I think that's a common experience. Where are you seeing that in your lives right now in San Antonio?
Well, I would draw on, I'm one of the fortunate ones to have a lapel mic. But I would, there are some commonalities between that expression of compassion and how I see it in San Antonio. A couple of the big ones are that one is intergenerational, right? I know in a lot of instances we've talked about, especially with the theme this evening, compassion as a response to trauma, compassion as a response to some damage. And it's very important for us to recall that that damage, as has been acknowledged numerous times, did not happen overnight, right? Compassion is an intergenerational commitment. So while we seek to realize it in this moment and in this day, it's also implicating our progeny, our children, and our elders, right? The folks that we receive this situation from and whom we can work with to improve it. A really concrete and beautiful expression of compassion, because we can talk about it theoretically, but it's helpful to have an example you can point to, is the action of Bethel AME Church on the east side of San Antonio. Bethel African Methodist Episcopal, Reverend Melvin Wilson is the pastor there, and he, in discernment with his community, decided to convert their parsonage, which is the house that typically houses their pastor, into a heating and cooling station for folks in their community, right? That's a really concrete example of how people of faith got together and decided in a really concrete way to put their resources where their faith directs it, right? To compassion towards their neighbor and to assisting them in times of need. So that's one example that I would bring to this discussion.
Rachel.
I'm reflecting as people are talking is about their different cultures that admittedly I'm not going to answer your question directly. Is that we're all talking about actually being aggressively compassionate, aggressively kind. And I think in the world today, everything feels so forceful. Like you read the news and it feels crushing sometimes. And so it's heartwarming to think that our communities are all responding to that aggressive forces that we're feeling by being aggressively kind back. And it's weird when you see aggressive, you think of like violence maybe, but we do use that word in other ways. You would say that someone is aggressively pursuing their studies, so maybe it's not so far-fetched. And so I think about in the Jewish tradition that there are a multitude of rabbinic sources and quotes from rabbis thousands of years ago who speak to the urgency in going to do a good deed. So you should always run to do a mitzvah. A mitzvah is a good deed. that you should wake up every morning thinking, how can I go help somebody? What can I go do to make the world a better place? And I think that's something that probably all of our cultures have as kind of a shared default, a shared mindset. And so I've been really reflecting for myself, how can I pass that on to my children? How can I wake up every morning and think, what can I do today, right now, to go be kind and compassionate to somebody?
Mine is the best.
That's good. That's a very compassionate handing of the microphone.
Thank you all. Beautiful reflections. Thank you all very much. I just think of my own traditions and faith. Thinking about the word compassion in Arabic, that is rahmah. Also, it's a divine attribute. So, like that, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Probably you have heard that, in the name of the most compassionate, the most merciful. So something that we get to recite every single day. So I think uttering the words, of course, is important. So, but of course, the best thing is just to go and do something for the community. Just thought about my daughter. She is 14 years old, Sophia. When we just like watch stuff on YouTube, what I try to do sometimes is that try to show her like different cultures, different nations, languages, etc. So she can get this appreciation of other cultures, so she can get to know them. That way she can just broaden her horizon. I think that is important because a lot of times the rhetoric that we have is so narrow. It has to be right. This is the thing. Well, don't you see? Look, we're the majority, etc. But I try to tell her, hey, look at this, like generational issues that say like African Americans going through, or other indigenous communities or whoever. So try to like open her mind up for that type of information that she may not be getting, I'm thinking, from maybe other sources sometimes. So just a little something that I'm doing personally. Then I also, quickly want to reflect back about my volunteering at the Bexar County Jail for over a decade. And that was something where I get to practice compassion to folks who are coming from different backgrounds, but just these are the people of the city of San Antonio. These are the products of this society, right? We cannot quite, abandon them. So I am really like honored and so grateful that I was part of hundreds of volunteers did really great work in the county jail, which is helping us taxpayers, saving us money, but also really connecting with those individuals and trying to see the humanity in them and trying to be with them, just being present, not judging, but understanding, trying to listen to them and trying to give them some ray of hope, which is not always easy. But I found it to be rewarding, that I was rewarded, I think, by just doing that work. I think a lot of times when you give, then you get sort of like more than what you give. And I also kind of appreciate that. That was my little thing that I thought I could do for the city. And I'm grateful that I was part of that great community of volunteers.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Mustafa. And it kind of segues into something I've been thinking about, and I'm going to go a little off script and challenge our panelists here a little bit. So much of our dialogue on compassion and the things we think about as examples of compassionate community revolve around people like this, largely in the faith community. Do you see people using the words compassion and talking about compassionate acts and being compassionate outside of the faith tradition and the faith environment? Do you see that?
I would say that that word definitely needs to have a renaissance. It needs to come back. It needs to be more present in multiple spaces every step of the way. It should be something that even kindergartners are taught, like compassionate education should be something that is prioritized, right? Because when we enter this world, we aren't entering it with a sense of hatred. We're entering it with compassion and understanding and kindness with one another. So to be able to name that early on and to be able to see that frequently mentioned, I think would be extremely important. And I'll be honest, I don't think that I see that very frequently outside of faith-based groups. We live in a world right now that's focused on individualism instead of collectivism. And because of that, collectivism is in a sense an antithesis to nationalism, right? An individualistic perspective without really truly understanding and connecting with those around you is with the antithesis of compassion, right? So if we see this individualistic mindset and this separation of one another, whether it be in the professional realm, the personal realm, the societal realm, whatever it may be, right? Where does compassion lie? So if we prioritize it, if we bring that word back forward, if we utilize it, if we make sure to position that not only in a professional or formal setting, but also just a personal, interpersonal. Are we talking about compassion at the dinner table with our children? Are we talking about compassionate and saying, hey, like I really value the fact that you showed an immense amount of compassion to me in a really rough time. And that had a huge impact on me, as well as multiple generations around me. And to be able to use that language and to see that and acknowledge that with one another, it does need to come back. It does need to be more present outside of just a beautiful space like this, right? It needs to be something that should be something that's said and seen in the back of your mind and in the forefront every day. And I think that conversations like this are necessary because we're all going to walk away having more conversations about compassion and being able to carry that with us. So, yeah.
You're segueing into the next segment, but I want to hear from other folks too on that.
I just thought about the phrase compassion fatigue. We also use that, of course, but I guess what we're talking about is a little different than this. Yes.
So go with that. What does that mean?
Well,
How do you
compassion
see it?
fatigue, as far as I know, is something that you are finding yourself in this hard position that you are so like maybe tired of really like trying to help people out. Maybe your resources are just dwindling, or you don't maybe have sometimes enough courage, etc. But you sometimes get to a point in what you're doing, especially this is true for chaplaincy work, ministry, etc. But there's that. So I always think about this and then come back to it and say, well, yes, true, but I have to keep going. We have to keep going. We can't quite stop and then use this as an excuse. We have to somehow see one another and support each other and try to overcome the compassion fatigue, wherever that may be.
So I told this story last night at a reception, but so one of my first experiences on city council is getting yelled at a lot. That's what happens on Wednesday evenings at City Hall, is that we have public comment period and anybody can come in and talk about whatever they want to talk about. And a lot of it is just, frustration, vocalized, whether it's city's responsibility or not. And I remember at one point in the course of being yelled at, a woman who was doing the yelling turned to me and said, Mother Teresa said, do good anyway. And I wrote that down. I put it on the dais, and it kept there for 4 years to deal with compassion fatigue, because sometimes the outcomes are not evident. Sometimes you don't, maybe people who you're trying to help don't see it, don't appreciate it, whatever. But I can understand that feeling. But there are reminders that we have to continue going. And I later found out that was actually part of a poem that she had written on her childhood home. I don't have it with me, but at any rate, it's a reminder of how to deal with compassion fatigue. But again, more to the point, are you seeing it in secular spaces? Are you seeing it in your offices? Are you seeing it in places outside of a faith environment?
Well, I think I'm going to disappoint you here for a moment and say that I don't always feel like I'm seeing it in all of the faith communities.
That's okay.
And
now go with that.
And I think that's actually harder in many ways for me personally, is to feel like people of faith maybe aren't feeling that same sense of compassion and duty towards others, or maybe they're just feeling it for people within their community. And so then I face the challenge of doing good anyway, right? Of being compassionate back when I don't necessarily feel like it's being directed towards me. And I think we probably see that in the headlines in the national news. I think it also has knocked on my door, literally. I've had people knock on, I had some very kind people knock on my door recently. And they asked if I was interested in joining their Bible study. And I graciously declined. It's actually very easy to have short front door conversations when you're holding a baby. I recommend it. It's great. So I respectfully declined. And then kind of had to think for myself, I have a mezuzah on my door. I have a sign on the doorpost of my home that proclaims that my home is a Jewish home. So I had to think to myself, well, they probably didn't know that. Right? Not everybody knows that. Okay, it was really hard for me when they came again. To think like, maybe they didn't make good notes about which doors they'd already knocked on. As because my mind is going to a place of like, oh no, that they came to my door specifically because they know exactly what that is. So I think it's hard for me sometimes. I think it's finding compassion for people that are not a part of your community and that maybe you don't feel like are giving it to you. So maybe that's a depressing answer to your question.
No, it's an answer I think that a lot of people feel because the intermingling of politics and religion has served to use religion to divide people, which completely goes opposite of what you were saying, Jordan, which is about its understanding the interconnectedness of all of us. I appreciate you sharing that, Rich. Antonio?
Yeah, I would say that perhaps surprisingly, the second most common context in which I hear the term compassion is in the civic context. I think that has a lot to do with the reality that we're in San Antonio, that we've made public commitments to this kind of thing. I think an area of growth and potential for growth that we have on the question of compassion is connecting it beyond headlines, beyond slogans, beyond campaign season, to the discussions we're having about mass transit in the city, to the discussions we're having about heating and cooling centers, about access to education and preparation for the workforce. I mean, that's beyond the work of one man, beyond the work of one council, but it's certainly something that I think the folks in this room have a strong opportunity to go and have a conversation with their neighbors who aren't here tonight to connect that a little better in their minds. These things that we are voting on Saturday in part are deeply connected to compassion, and making that connection more real, even in how we have conversations in our kitchen tables and with our friends, I think is a critical task for us.
Amen, brother. Well said. So that's why we started with the Compassion Charter, because all of the stuff that we do at City Hall is built on that principle of dealing with trauma and dealing with inequities, and that's through its nature compassionate work. So let me switch gears now and talk about the opposite. You mentioned antidote. We'll save that for a moment, but we're also having a dialogue about nationalism, tribalism in the political sense. Talk about that. What are examples that you're seeing of nationalism in our world, experiencing it perhaps, and perhaps even examples here in San Antonio? And you can be courageously compassionate, because all the folks here will be informed by your answers. It's a safe space. Right?
Since I already have the microphone, I'll go. I would say, I mean, I'll take a historical component of it as well. It's something that lives in the past, but also lives in the current moment. And an unfortunate example of nationalism within the Indigenous community would be boarding schools, right? For those of you who may not know, for a very long time, until about the 1970s, Indigenous children and people were taken from their families and their homes and forced into assimilation schools where it was kill the Indian, save the man, right? And so there was an extensive amount of trauma that a lot of our communities experienced, where We weren't allowed to pray. We weren't allowed to speak our languages, share our culture, have our long hair, wear things that resonate with us, connect to the land and appreciate our life force, which is the land and the earth itself and one another as people. And these things were beaten out of our community members. They would wash their skin with steel wool and not allow them to speak to one another. Or if they were to speak in their native language, then they were forced to wash their mouths out with soap. And oftentimes, a lot of these individuals did not make it outside of those boarding schools, and that deserves to be acknowledged here today. And so when we talk about, intergenerational trauma as well, right? Like the nationalism component that's present with that is that when we deny someone their autonomy and their sovereignty as an Indigenous person and their access to their religious freedoms, and that exists for all communities, but as I speak for this specific community, it destroys that community for several generations thereafter, right? One of my uncles experienced being in a boarding school. And whenever I was really young, he had to have the conversation with us and say, I'm not ready to share my story yet. I'm not there, but it's very hard for me to express affection and to express love and to even feel those positive feelings because of how much harm I've experienced as well. And you need to recognize that that exists outside of our family. It exists in other families too. And so then it goes into lateral violence. It goes into these things of where Indigenous people have constantly faced substance abuse, domestic violence, sexual assault. These are heavy topics. They do need to be acknowledged, because by the nationalistic component of trying to assert one homogenous group over another and not recognizing that each one of us has our own sacred place and our own background and personality and identity, and to assert that over and to defeat it, denies someone their access to their lineage and who they are as a person and who they are in their community. And so you see that, a lot of people think that these boarding schools was something that was in the 1800s, but it existed until as of recent, right? And even Native people have only had citizenship in the United States for over 100 years, right at 100 years right now. So to acknowledge and see all of those different components and see that nationalism doesn't just impact in that one specific moment, but it does have all of its other domino effects into your communities and into who you are as a person, right? So when we look at the way that nationalism impacts that, I mean, even today, right? Like we see Indigenous people on a consistent basis trying to heal those efforts and to pour love back into our communities and to utilize compassion as, restoration, right? Like restorative healing. Like it's the idea of like, okay, instead of separating and pushing someone away and just denying them, oh, they're different than me, or oh, they're a bad person, right? That concept doesn't exist. It's a hurt person will hurt someone and a healed person will heal someone. So whenever we recognize that when someone is, experiencing these issues or dealing with these lineal impacts, it's recognizing that through healing and through that, you can help them reclaim their access to who they are in the generations that follow from before them, as well as that after. So nationalism, I mean, you see it even today, right? Like we have traditions and access and medicines that we carry with us are constantly challenged. Our treaties are constantly ignored, or our history is erased. And when we talk about the ideas even within schools about manifest destiny, that is contributing to the culture of erasure and the lack of acknowledgement for the genocide that our community has faced. But we're also not bound specifically and limited to these colonial or westernized ideas that we're only bound to the identity of trauma either. Because just on the same front and on the same coin that we have intergenerational trauma, we also have intergenerational wisdom. And to allow that to exist and to allow that to flow is to do the opposite of trying to say one group should be more powerful over the other. Like nationalism is loyalty to a flag, and Indigenous people have loyalty to the land and to one another and our existence and the sacredity of the space that we share as individuals. So to see that and to be able to recognize that that is the resistance that we're all carrying all together in our own communities, we have to combat nationalism. We see it, and we see that it's on the rise once again, right? It's not something that's ever gone away, but it's something that we always continue to fight against.
Well, and embedded in your answer was a really elegant definition of what nationalism is. And I would encourage you all to take a look at the back page of your handout and really read what that nationalism word means. You know, it's not nation necessarily with a capital N. It is really the idea that there's a superiority among a group of people based on their culture, which is exactly what you were describing, Jordan. So thank you for that. Nationalism in the current context, globally and locally.
Going back to my daughter and just putting her on spot. So we were just observing this group of people on this street. And then she turned to me and said, "Dad, look, your people." And then my people, okay. So she was referring to a group of, I think, looked like a Pakistani immigrants. Then it was an opportunity for me to tell her that, you know, these are a group of people that you may not know much about, and I may know some, but these are basically guests, our guests in this, you know, city, also legal people anyways. But just that like simple statement, maybe she was joking or not, but either way, I think seeing other communities, just like our community, just like our group, the othering issue, right? If the other is not as good as us. So I was trying to use that opportunity with her at that moment, trying to tell her that it would be great for us to actually stop by and then like, you know, just like say hi to them and maybe just like have a little chit chat or something. And I think that is what's needed to really combat nationalism. In my experience, being in this country for almost a quarter century, what has helped me really a lot was to meet really a diverse group of people from all walks of life. I think that is the best cure for us to be able to say, you know what, actually, I know a Jewish person, I know a Jehovah's Witnesses, I know, and folks from different communities, different groups. That helps a lot. So again, it's just education, just awareness, trying to fight all together. Of course, there's that majority that speaks louder, yes, but it is our job to, I think, to speak and say something wherever we feel like we need to. That way, we can maybe just educate someone that that particular group of people may look so different than you and I, or you, but they're just, inherently people, and they deserve respect and dignity, and that should be the basis of our interaction with anyone.
You're making me wish that there was like a handbook about how to teach this to your child.
That's a good idea.
Any authors out there? Well, because in theory, it's easy, right? In practice, when I'm looking at my 4-year-old, it's harder for him to have pride in his community and his culture and know where he is, who he is, but to also respect other people. Also, he's 4, so but I do. She's writing. I hope I didn't just give you a bunch of work for your last week. We don't have a guidebook. There isn't a way to teach this to our kids. There isn't a way to make sure that we don't repeat the lessons that theoretically we should have learned as a people. And I fear that we're going backwards. As I hear you speak about your community, and I think about what's happening in the Texas legislature and what's happening to public schools, and I don't mean to compare the two. I know they're not the same thing, but it feels a little bit like a slope. Right, like that we're on the edge of what's going to happen, and we're in a position where we can still, as a people, do something about it and change what's happening and fight these forces. But we have to figure out how to teach our kids and how to do that.
I'm going to disagree with you.
Bring it.
I think we teach our children about this all the time. I mean, I think that's the earmark of good parenting. Teaching young children about inclusion and about the value of other people and how, just because I might be different from you, might go ride the different bus or something like that, that we don't treat them less. I mean, I hope most of you parents are teaching kids that. But maybe it's not as complex as theories of nationalism. But are there things that we do teach our children that when we don't, starts them down the slope of nationalism?
Or is like he's pushing back at me.
I say this because Rachel used to teach my son preschool. And I don't think my son has started down that slope. So there's obviously things that you have been doing as a teacher that, cultivate these values in young people.
I appreciate that. And I think in some ways, maybe what I'm saying is this room, I'm confident is doing that. But are we as a society, are we as a whole? Is every teenager is going to say things to their parents? How are all of the parents responding? And I'm not saying that people are responding inappropriately, purposefully. I think we all get questions from our children that sometimes stump you, right? And you don't exactly know what to say. And when you get in the car with your kid or you're walking down the street with your kid, you don't know what question they're about to ask you. So what are we doing to prepare all of the adults and all of society about how to answer those questions and how not to repeat all of the mistakes that we know we've done?
I think in returning to the question of observation, because I think it's an important one. There are like these broad things we can point to, right? The suggestion that a country of immigrants should have a single language. The suggestion that a country founded on religious liberty should have a single tradition, right? These are examples of nationalism on a large scale. I think a second example is the erasure of these intermediary identity groups, right? You're either an individual or you're aligned with the national party, the national system. You are only a national entity or an individual. You'll cease to be a member of your church, a member of your community, right? Part of your local YMCA or reading group, right? You erase these intermediary identities and atomize folks. That's a function of nationalism. The third place that I observe it, which is really concerning to me, is the way that it creeps into our conversations with one another in the form of fear of people who are different from us, right? And this is where I think it connects to the question of what we're showing our children. Because while parents can tell children things a million times, and if the child sees you behave differently than what you've proclaimed, that child will not take it seriously, right? So perhaps even more powerful than encouraging children to respect folks who are different than them, which is still something we should do. They're going to take it more seriously, and it will be more powerful for them if they see folks who are different from you at your kitchen table, at dinner, right? At your PTA, at your reading group, at your knitting group. That's what they'll take seriously, and I think that's one of the best ways we'll counteract that tendency.
And I'd like to just mention a little bit more to that, because I've been listening to everybody here, right? And I really like the question that you had different views on. But by saying, right, like, how do you teach that? And sometimes it's also how you don't teach it, but you build the space for it to exist naturally, right? So like and exactly that, what's the best way to get to know the person that's next to you? Everybody loves a good meal, right? And we were talking about this earlier, the way that I grew up, I actually am from the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And the neighborhood that I grew up on, it was full of people of different communities of all backgrounds, right? Refugee communities from Syria, Turkey, Iran, Ethiopia, Eritrea. Every single house spoke a different language, and no child that was there was focused on the differences that we had, but focused on the simplicities of life and the enjoyment that comes from the innocence of childhood, running down the street, playing soccer without shoes on, and eating different foods from each of the families that were present, right? Sharing food and sharing story with one another built a community for all of us to have compassion in the stories that we shared while we're just enjoying a good meal, while we're enjoying a Yemeni coffee, which I love, by the way. But when you think about these things, you have these comparisons, you have these stories that come out naturally, and there's not the forcefulness, there's not the expectation of it, or the entitlement of, oh, you are from this community now, I need to hear directly every single part of information from you and your perspective, which a lot of us are happy to help assist with those stories. But to be able to share the really genuine, vulnerable space to let those stories flow naturally, to understand one another naturally, to build relatives and to build relationships with one another, to the point where whenever I'm not in this space, I'm going to think about all of you. I'm going to carry your energy with me, and I can tap into that, and you can feel me even though we're not looking at each other face to face. And that alone is also compassion, right? So yeah, like it's teaching it, it's having the conversation at a table. And it's also even within the workplace, even in a professional setting, even in a political setting, look around you, look at the table and look at the chairs that are sitting there and think about it. How many people here look just like me and who's not here right now? And start to ask yourself why, right? Why isn't that other person sitting there? Why isn't this other perspective being represented? And how can I do my part to pull up a chair and to put my hand forward and extend that invitation to allow for everyone to be represented? And that is compassion, right? And it's natural in that way because you're allowing these things to flourish and to stay in tune with our natural state, which is to be connected and to be loved and to love one another. So that is necessary. And I think, yes, there is the component of teaching it. And I think that handbook would be a really good idea. I think there's a lot of people who could benefit from reading that. But I also think exactly like you're saying here too, I think I'm the buffer between the two of you guys. But by allowing the natural spaces for these things to flow and exist, you don't have to initially name it. You allow children to experience it. You allow one another to experience it in that more familial way. And then you name it. And then you acknowledge it and you carry that forward. So when there is a moment when someone's frustrating you or someone says something to you, it's also having the compassion to recognize, ooh, that was an interesting comment, but I also recognize that there's a lapse of understanding with one another. And so acknowledging that and having that response as a parent too, I think in those moments, it's reminding you of the natural flow that can be existing in that cultivation and that nourishment of those communities. So.
Thank you very much, Jordan. And I think you actually kind of moved us to the next concept I want to talk about here, because, you know, and my disagreement with Rachel is a function of this. I don't think she's giving herself credit, because I think there are things that she has been doing as a teacher that actually do cultivate the compassion within her, her students. I saw it as evidence, but also helps us if we have examples that are reinforcing for young people, helps to prevent the kind of growth of nationalism that we're seeing at the local, state, and national level. So I want you to kind of build on what Jordan is saying now in terms of compassion as an antidote to nationalism. What are those practices? What are those experiences and maybe things that you've been taught that can help us combat what we're seeing in our community and in our world? For adults too.
Just thought about the work of Raindrop Community Center for almost now 15 years, I believe. We have Sumaira and Suleiman here and Mehmet, some of the members, and some of you probably have been there. That was one of the things I think the mission of the center was to really gather all kinds of different people just to share a meal and just be together and share that presence and just listen to one another and see like maybe how you sort of like talk about yourself or talk about your community. So I think that has helped us, I hope, as a city to, again, having different communities gathering together, just eating something, not necessarily always having those difficult conversations, but just getting to know each other. Because a lot of times, if I know how to pronounce your name, wow, I mean, that's huge. Honestly, right? If I know how to pronounce your faith tradition, that's another success. So little things, but they do matter a lot. So I can definitely say that. And something little, maybe just a little different, maybe many of you do. Whenever I watch news at my house with my daughter, especially when she comes to me, when we hear or watch a tragedy happen to someone, I try to make it a habit and say, you know what? Let's say a little prayer for these people. Let's just whoever, whatever they are, but just little prayer, little something for them, just to alleviate their suffering or something. Yes, we have to find really in a practical ways of really, I think, practicing compassion, so that way this would be something like a counter, narrative to nationalism, little something.
You're up, Rachel.
Feel like I'm getting in trouble. No, I'm kind of simmering on a couple of Jewish texts here, about the idea of how we're all created in the image of God, and how if we think of each of us as maybe having a little bit of God in you, or being reflective of God, or some piece of that, then we're all the same. We're all equal. And I think that has a lot of power for me. And I think about how to pass on some of that idea that we're all equal to my children. I say a lot where tell my son how lucky we are to have whatever. How lucky are we that we had air conditioning today when we got home? How lucky are we that we had enough food? And I try to name all those things, but I actually have been saying lucky lately, that it's not owed to us. Not everybody has this. A different chain of events could have happened, and we may not have had air conditioning in our house. We may not have had enough food. And so to me, kind of trying to tie all those things together. If we think that we are just all equal in the eyes of God, then anything that I have is just luck, and we're all the same. And maybe that helps me be a little more grateful for the things. So I wonder sometimes about the specific words that we use when we're talking to people about what we have and what communities don't have, whether that can help.
Just an awareness that,
Yeah, thank you.
that no, I wholeheartedly agree. In fact, when I first ran for city council, one of the themes of my campaign was meet your neighbors, because we live in a very diverse place, and I wanted people to understand that in order for us to collectively move forward, there are things that we have to do to, to improve the lives of everyone. And if you understand that not everyone is in your same situation, maybe you can give grace to the collective path forward. But that awareness that, yeah, maybe the person living across the street from me doesn't have air conditioning, might not have enough food to eat, is one way to combat the idea that, if they don't, I'm superior. Antonio?
In terms of practicing compassion, there's like a couple of caveats that I have to give before I would offer any advice. The first is that I like to say I'm a practicing Christian. I'll let you know when I get good at it. The second is that this is something that I struggle with. So please don't take this as I'm suggesting to you that I am some expert in it. But one of the most powerful things that Christ commands of me is to love your enemy, right? That's hard. That's difficult. I struggle with that at the national level. I struggle with that at a number of different levels. One of the first places I'm commanded to love my enemy is in my local community, in my family. So what I would advise, what I would encourage, what I struggle with is to call someone with whom you have a wounded relationship and have a conversation with them. Not about politics. When you hear stories of folks who are no longer having Thanksgiving dinners with this or that person because of the political situation, that's a victory for nationalism. That's a victory for hatred and fear. We counteract that by reaching out to these folks. And I'm not saying it has to be I forgive you and you forgive me. It can be, did you watch the game? Have you seen a good movie? Talk to me about something that reminds us that we're in a loving relationship with another human being rather than across the aisle with someone we disagree with. So I would encourage that as a means of practice.
Can I unpack this for a minute? Because you said something that there's a dichotomy there, because you said, love your enemy. And my reaction is, who's your enemy? And then you define it as someone you're in a wounded relationship with. So talk to me more about that.
Well, I really, really sincerely do not believe that folks are born with hatred in their heart. It's something that they arrive at as a result, in some instances of trauma, in some instances of terrible things being done to them. In many instances, it's a fear of losing what they have, right? And too often we misinterpret the conversations we have with loved ones out of a fear that they're somehow threatening us or going to take something away from us, our security from us. That can be economic, that can be emotional, right? When we engage in relationships from a perspective of fear, that's when it tends to come out as anger and hatred and what we'd recognize typically as an enemy. But it's fundamentally a woundedness between two people who've lost the ability to trust that each other care for one another.
That's great. Love it. Jordan.
I agree with that. And I think going deeper into it, right? Like when you talk about loving your enemy, it's also when you're talking about the action of really believing and embodying compassion that doesn't just exist towards others, but it's also towards yourself. And I think that that is something that in a world that's so quick to move and quick to feel and quick to focus on the negatives and to focus on self-critiques and criticism and to dive into your own head. Yes, introspection is thinking about some of your hardships or your flaws, but it's also thinking about some of your strengths and recognizing that in some moments you did the best with what you had at that time, right? Be kind to yourself, be compassionate with yourself, because like we mentioned earlier, compassion fatigue, you can't carry the weight of everyone on your shoulders if you're also not caring about you, right? If you're not starting with yourself, if you're not taking a moment to, you know, when you're thinking about someone that now comes up and that you have this wounded relationship and there has been harm caused to you, the first thing you're going to have as a human being is an emotional reaction. But are you going to have the compassion not only for the person in front of you, but for yourself to say, you know what? I'll be back in 30 minutes. I'm going to go digest this one for a second, right? Because you take that moment to say, ooh, I could really go crazy right now and feel my feelings and say what I need to say. Or you could say, you know what? When's the last time I really took a second and sat in solitude? With solitude comes wisdom. It comes from the unconscious parts of who you are, and it allows for that free space for your mind to understand not only what's going on inside, but these things that have happened outside of you. And so when you take that time for yourself, that is a form of compassion to yourself, to allow you the ability to step away from those emotions, to step away from that fear, that anger, that just intense emotion, whatever it may be, to then continue into the conversation with the person that you have every right to feel harmed by, but you're expressing compassion and setting that as the precedent moving forward by allowing yourself the ability to bring that within your own right. It doesn't just help the person in front of you, it helps you. So when you're able to do that, right, like that's active compassion in that sense. And it allows for, you know, exactly like when you're speaking to an enemy, it's not really an enemy. And like hate and love are on the same coin. It's one has more of one than the other and vice versa, but they are tied together. So it falls into that same little realm of like, okay, how can I actively practice compassion in this moment? And how can I acknowledge that with other individuals and make sure that it is being embodied every step of the way? So be kind to yourself, be compassionate to yourself, take a moment, carry these stories and these moments with yourself and reflect on them. And then when you find another situation and someone else is trying your buttons that day, remember the moment that you had with someone else prior to and think, okay, how is this similar, or how is this my reaction for it too, right? So there's so many different layers, both on the individual level and the collective level, but it's also take the time to remember the stories and the experiences that are shared with you and realize that that is a web of who you are in your life, right? And when's the last time you sat down and connected with something that was not that does not have a voice for you, right? That does not speak to you, right? When something that we all have in this room is the connection to the air that we breathe and the water that we drink, the sun that we feel, and the land that we stand on. So we are all connected in that way. And if we're not taking time to build that relationship on our own, then we're not going to have a relationship with each other. So when you live with the land gives back to you, and the people that we all stand on this land and breathe this air together share that. So take that time, take that solitude, have that compassion and bring it forward with you every step of the way, even in those moments of frustration.
So we are technically at time for this panel, but I feel compelled to ask just a couple more questions, if that's okay with everybody. Because I want to bring it back around to this conversation about children and this idea that there are enemies and there are, which is in a more intellectual understanding, people you're in a wounded relationship with. At what point do children believe that they have enemies? And is that a moment in which we can redirect that thought to what you were talking about?
I think one of the parents should answer that one first.
I'm not on. It starts young. I think, and I used to do staff training. I would try and get counselors and people that were working with kids to imagine being a small child again, right? And their world is, I don't mean this in a rude way, but is a little bit smaller, right? So if you are small and you didn't like what you had for breakfast, it can ruin your whole day, because that was like maybe the only thing you got to decide today. But and so my answer is like really, really young, actually, that a kid can feel like they have an enemy because their world is a little smaller. They only interact with 10 people on a given day. If they had a fight with one of them, to them, it starts so young. You hear a lot in a 3-year-old, 4-year-old classroom, like, well, I'm not inviting you to my birthday party. Which I think is kind of where it starts, right? We've created a conflict. We now have a problem in our relationship. They don't know how to deal with it. They don't know what to do with that.
Enemy is a strong word, of course. I just think about my daughter and younger kids. Maybe they would not define it as animosity or something, but it would be something about maybe something silly, of course, that maybe they're fighting over. That would be their issue. They wouldn't exactly know the terms, how to sort of like elaborate that. But I think it's the parents, or it's people that around them, I think, are putting those words, into their minds and mouths. I think how we speak about one another, I think, is just defining how they would start also speaking about animosity or love or hatred, etc. So I think it's us doing, whether it's good or bad, but we are the problem.
And that's the end of our panel. Does anybody else want to add to that? This is an interesting question that I don't think we'll leave with an answer to, but I would encourage us to leave with it and think about it, because it's the idea that there's an enemy that prevents you from seeking resolution. But when you redirect that to the thought that this is just a person you're having in a wounded relationship with, it leaves the door open for resolution. And so at some point, children get the idea that there are relationships worth leaving behind. And that's the part that I think we need to think about. Yeah. So let me get to the last question. And this is the only question that would be timed. And that is, if you could say one thing to the entire world based on all that you know in the context of compassion and nationalism and the antidote to all that, what would it be? And I would like for you to think about it succinctly and give us like a 1-minute answer, or if that.
I'm going to go to the golden rule page that we have here. And the Jewish one, it says, what is hateful to you, do not do to your neighbor. This is the whole Torah. All the rest is commentary. It's based on a story of someone who went to a rabbi and asked for that rabbi to summarize the whole Torah while the rabbi was standing on one foot. So he gave a really short answer. The next sentence in the story is my favorite, though. And the next sentence is, now go and study. And that, I think, is my message, my thing. Go and study, go and learn more. Go and read what your tradition says. Go and learn what other people's tradition says. I think the more that we all talk about these things and learn about these things, then the answers are in your pocket. And when you're in a situation of conflict, when you're in a situation where you need a minute, whenever you're in that situation, if you have studied and learned, it's in your pocket and it's ready. So go and study.
Trying to keep my response to a minute for sure. But I would say feel your energy and feel the energy of everyone that's around you, and know that that exists outside of the physical present moment, right? When you feel that and you get to know that and you get to tap into that, when you tune up the volume of something that is innate into who you are as a person, it's easy to look at someone in the eyes and feel who they are, to feel their understanding. I might not know their name, I might not know their story, but I can feel their existence and I can honor and respect that from the start, right? And so when you interact with individuals, when you're learning different faiths, when you're studying it, also just listen, tap in, listen, turn that volume up, be in tune with yourself and in tune with the world around you, and build them as a relative. See the people around you as relatives. We are all related in some way, fashion, or form. And when we look at it that way, it becomes more personal. It becomes more emotional. It becomes more authentic and genuine to who we are as people. So know the energy, understand each other, listen when you can, speak when you're asked, and learn to just embrace the love that exists naturally between people as a whole, and carry that with you and recognize that you are a tapestry of every single person that you interact with. I'm going to remember the laughs and the stories that were shared here today, and I'm going to remember some of the hard things that we've talked about as well. And I'm not going to just take that and hear that as something that, oh, that's what somebody else said and now I've listened to that. No, that's energy. Your voice is energy, and I'm going to carry that with me in every conversation I go into moving forward. And that should be that way every day and in every step of the way. So tap in, take a moment, sit in solitude, listen when you can, speak when you can, when you're asked, and really enjoy and take up the space and live life the way that life is meant to be lived. It's an experience, it's a connection, it's something we share together. So don't forget that even though we might have different backgrounds or settings or situations, we are sharing this world and this walk of life together. So let's honor that with one another and continue with these people next to you, not behind you or in front of you. They're with you. Speak with, not at or to.
Beautiful. What I would just say that try your best to feel the suffering and the pain of the people anywhere you see and come across as deeply as possible. I think there's something very holy about suffering. I cannot quite exactly define it in terms of how it's good, it's not, but it's good, it's not. So if you think about all that, and God sees through everyone's, of course, suffering, but I think as individuals, as communities, as families, groups, tribes, etc., if we can try to feel whoever's pain, really like as if like it's our own pain, and I think that is going to teach us a lot about compassion, and this is going to be a great buffer zone for us to fight nationalism or basically just bad-mouthing other people or whoever. So very important to practice that, trying to feel that suffering of others as yours.
I will similarly try to be distinct, and I'm similarly going to talk about a famous rabbi. Jesus, right, has posed the question, and I'm talking out of my own tradition, but he's posed the question, what's the greatest commandment? He says, love God with your heart, mind, and soul, love your neighbor as yourself, right? This lawyer then asks him, oh, but who's my neighbor, right? And we get the wonderful parable of the Good Samaritan, which is important. But that question, who's my neighbor? In that context, the lawyer's asking, who's outside of the law? Who does this not really apply to? Who am I allowed to not love? And Christ's answer is that there's nobody in that category, right? There's nobody that you're not allowed to love or you're allowed to discriminate against, to say, they're outside the law, to say that they're not worthy of compassion. They can be freely hated. They can be freely disappeared. There's nobody that falls in that category. So I think if I left you all with something, it would be that if a voice, a source of media or information, or a person in your life is calling you to fear and to anger and to hatred, that call is not coming from God. God is calling you to love, and God is calling you to compassion. And that's how you will recognize God in your midst, is the face of compassion.
Well, let's give our great panelists a big round of applause. It's been a great conversation. Left us with a lot of things to think about. And for the past 8 years, I would consider myself a student, and I've certainly learned a lot from you all tonight. So thank you very much. And I think we turn the floor back over to Darsh.
Thank you to our panel for those thoughtful and sincere responses. Now at this time, I'll ask that you please turn in your note cards with your comments and questions to the volunteers. And now to help us reflect on what we've heard, please welcome Reverend Matthew Homeyer, a South Texas native who moved to San Antonio from Waco in 2023 to serve as a senior pastor of Trinity Baptist Church. Reverend Matthew Homeyer.
And pass those down. Pass those down. All right. They need questions. Friends, this is a Baptist preacher's nightmare. I've been giving 6 minutes. I know there's a couple other Baptist pastors in the room. Pastor Kemp, 6 minutes. We're just getting warmed up. If I accomplish this, do not tell my congregation, if you know any members, that I can do this. Friends, it's an honor to be here. I appreciate the invitation. I stand humbled following this group and their wisdom. And I've appreciated sitting at your feet and learning from each of you tonight. As I reflected on this and all that was shared, and the struggle that was shared, the successes that were shared, the hope of what is to come, and the fear that it may not come, I reflected on my own tendency to be daunted by the complexity of the wicked problems of our world, of our community, of our neighborhoods, and our own families. The hope I gained from each of your stories is to not be daunted by complexity, but to make it simple. It's as simple as the person next to us, or the person with whom we're in a wounded relationship. And there's ancient truths, and there's simple truths that perhaps we go back to and cling to, that has wisdom that's past the centuries and the ages and spans traditions, that we call tonight, have the law of reciprocity, which is good. The law of reciprocity applied with an ethic of compassion is better still, the highest application perhaps of this law of reciprocity. And compassion undergirded with the deepest, most transformative forms of love we can muster is even better still when we practice with this. It's simple, it's ancient, it remains true, and yet, as we confess here tonight, remains shockingly difficult for even those of us attempting it. And it remains frustratingly rare. We understand why, I think. For the ancient and complex enemy of love and compassion is fear. And fear is tricky, and fear wears so many faces and names. The name by which we call it tonight is nationalism, but it spawns so many isms throughout history, throughout the world. It will continue to do so. We know this in ourselves, or I do. Fear tempts us to believe compassion is weak. It tempts us to believe love is foolish. I can understand the appeal of the isms. When we fear, we circle like quail with people with whom we feel safe, which is so often those we live near, those we work near, those we're most similar with. And it feels good to draw the circle tight around our group and say anyone outside is other, anyone outside is wrong, and we're okay. But it's a lie. It's a lie every time. Compassion undergirded in love is our antidote. That's what we're here to confess. It's what we're here to encourage one another in tonight. We all belong to some of our different circles, and circles are okay, but we must refuse that temptation to harden the circle until it becomes brittle. We must refuse the temptation to shrink our circle. We're here tonight to expand and broaden and deepen the circles to which we belong, to make them more like Venn diagrams that overlap, where our differences show, but yes, the similarities do as well, to challenge and grow and change. The attempt to compassion I reflected on as we shared the struggle is destined to fail because it's a accomplished, hold on with me, because it's something that you can never complete, right? We never complete the work of compassion. We will be tempted to feel foolish, and fear will seem to be winning. Fear is so good at building systems that seem insurmountable. But friends, it is always a lie. The work of compassion and love is slow but sure. It is destined to reveal the brittle nature of fear that, given time, is doomed to crumble. So friends, may I offer encouragement, but there are times when you may feel foolish, or you may wonder if we're moving forward, or you may wonder who is with you and who's around you. We are ambassadors of love undergirding compassion. We are its agents, launched into this community and beyond. We've talked about how this is part of the divine essence that we may access differently, but it's common to us all. We must not grow discouraged. We must refuse to be silent or to give in to the fear that will rear its head. So be encouraged, friends. You encourage me tonight by your presence. You encourage me tonight by your stories. Trust in the ancient, simple truth that love conquers fear, and compassion is our path forward together. I don't think I hit 6 minutes, but I was close. Thank you all.
Reverend Omar.
Thank you, Reverend. Now I would like to hear from you all. Mayor Nurnberg has been provided some of your comments and questions and will direct them to the panel. Thank you.
We have a winning question. And so I'm going to pose this to the entire panel here. What do you think is holding good people back from practicing concrete compassion, and how can we bring them along? There are good people in the world. In fact, that's pretty much everybody. But things are holding them back from practicing concrete compassion. How do we bring them along?
I think you stand side by side with them and you acknowledge them for the greatness that they have and that who they are, right? It's one thing to embody and feel like a good person. It's another thing to hear it, especially from someone else, right? It's acknowledging that. And we live in a world right now where being kind and being good and being open is a unique act, and sometimes can come across as you mentioned previously, a little foolish, a little funny sometimes, right? But there's strength in it, and kindness and joy and laughter and goodness is the biggest form of resistance you can have, especially in unprecedented times. So it's standing right there side by side with them. And, it's recognizing that unity lies in the word community. So standing with them and holding that unity, holding that space, and cheering them on and pulling it out of them and putting the microphone in their hand and saying, while we're up here, we're also just normal people, right? So everybody could be up here. Everybody could be speaking about compassion. Everybody could be embodying that and bringing that conversation forward. And it's hard sometimes to be good in a world where sometimes being good is speaking up when no one else will. And even if your voice is shaking and your hand is shaking, it's still saying, you've got it. We've got it together. I've got your back. You've got mine. So we're standing here together. Join me and invite each other to continue that goodness as well. So I think that's the way to go about it, right? Also, I was listening to a song earlier today. It's one of my favorite songs. And one of the things that's mentioned is this: take the identity, strip me naked, recognize what lies under that is also unity, right? And so that's also present in this too. Don't focus so much on what your identity is or the way that someone's going to perceive you. Focus on who you are and the way that you can't name it, and allow that to flow and pull that out of each other, right? Goodness is innate. So don't hold it back and try to acknowledge that with one another to continue inspiring it and making it acceptable, making it known, making it present in every way that you exist. And then goodness becomes the reality, not just something that's rare and near.
This is a two-part question, right? The first, what's holding us back? And then how do we get everyone else on board?
No, it's actually just one question. So I rephrased it the second time, but essentially, well, no, you're right. Actually, I'm reading it again. There's two parts here. What do you think is holding good people back?
Fear.
And how do we bring them along? You're right.
Fear. I don't need to elaborate maybe on that one. I got a lot of nods. Sticking your neck out there these days can seem scary with what's going on in the world. And I think sometimes people with really, really good motivations also are scared of doing the wrong thing. How I want to be helped isn't necessarily how you want to be helped. If I don't know you, if I don't know your culture, I may actually have really good intentions and I may not know what to do. And that's also fear. I think the answer so often is speaking up and telling our stories. And that's something I'm personally not very good at. In truth, I have had these people keep knocking on my door about Bible study. I haven't told a single person that happened to me. So we all need to be sharing our thoughts and sharing our feelings and sharing our stories. And that both emboldens people who might be a little hesitant, to speak up or to know that they can help. And I think we also need to share when we are doing kind, compassionate things. People that are givers are not always talkers about how they give, right? You feel like you're bragging, you feel like you're whatever. But the more that we talk about the good things that we're doing with the people in our circle and the people not in our circles, maybe we're also giving them ideas and we're encouraging them to do it. And it's not just that you're bragging on this great thing that you did, but you're sharing a story of something that someone else can do too.
Do I have to? I just remembered a friend of mine who was he just described himself as an atheist, and he would make lots of jokes. He would say, "Mustafa, one day I'm gonna serve you like pork chops, etc." So we just laugh and just talk. But he has taught me a lot in terms of recognizing the value of someone who is not believing or thinking like you or lives like you. But the fact that you can talk, you can communicate about pork chops or whatever. So being together next to each other is very important. But that was his struggle. He was telling me that his struggle was to tell his folks about people like myself, that he would just keep inviting them. Some of the atheists, but typically he was trying to invite folks who are not engaged in any kind of dialogue with, say, Muslims or others. So he really did his best to invite them over, and occasionally we got those folks, and it was really great conversation because there's a lot that is in common between us. So he has taught me that a lot. He just made fun of religion openly, so that was hard. But yet he would listen to me. He would listen to us. We would talk. I think that was important. Being able to find that, shared space and just talk respectfully, I think is very important. If we could do that, if we can tell those great people out there, hey, maybe we can just like gather here or here or here, and then maybe that'll just like spark their enthusiasm, and then they'll maybe do more.
I think I would affirm pretty much everything that's been said by the other panelists. Things that are holding folks back is not seeing it in their daily lives. My mother is fond of telling me that folks can't really hand on what they haven't received, right? So practicing compassion to the people that you see every day can be a powerful antidote to a national media ecosphere that is convincing them that folks are not being publicly compassionate, right? And so local community involvement with your neighbors is one of the most direct ways that it will be very, very evident that people can have different political opinions than you and yet still be good neighbors and worthy of respect, dialogue, and relationship. So practicing that together as a compassionate San Antonio, I think is going to go a long way to getting other folks involved and have them say, I want that kind of loving relationship. Let me get involved in it.
Well said by all of our panelists. And I would just add one more thing. As a compassionate community, also uplifting those who practice it and making them the examples that we can follow. So let's give another big round of applause to our panelists. Great job, everybody. Great job.
So thank you to all our panelists tonight for those really insightful answers. And thank you for taking the time out of your day to be here and address this audience. So now we will ask Mayor Nirenberg to stay on stage as we invite Reverend Ann Helmke to join us, along with Interfaith San Antonio Alliance board member Mehmet Oguz and Executive Director Wendy Holbrook to the stage, please. Yeah, panelists.
Yeah, we can.
Great job, dude.
Friends, tonight is extraordinary for many, many reasons, not the least of which is that we want to recognize two of our public servants who've been diligently about the work of compassion in San Antonio for 8 years. Mayor Ron Nirenberg and Reverend Dr. Ann Helmke, who has been our faith liaison for all of us, bringing us all together in so many ways. And we want to take this moment and invite all of us to stand in recognition and in solidarity for our appreciation of the work that has been done. So for the establishment of Compassionate SA, Compassionate USA, for all the moments that you've held our hands these many, many days, we say thank you.
Okay, before I read what is written here, let me take this 5 seconds and tell what I think. So I'm a mathematician, mathematical engineer by training, and I like numbers, collecting numbers, dates, and create beautiful stories. 2013 is important for me. I received an email from Mayor Hartberger. He said, one of my friends, he is running for an office as a councilman. Please support him. I said, okay, your friend is my friend. And so since then, I'm glad to say I know Mayor Nirenberg as a friend, as a mayor, and 2013 has a significant time in my life. Thank you. Now, and this is from Interfaith San Antonio Alliance. Mayor Ron Nirenberg, for your compassionate leadership, your vision and heart have strengthened our community and inspired unity across all walks of life. Thank you.
That's awesome.
Of course, I have a date for Reverend Hamke as well. So in 2014, with Dr. Larry Hufford, we went to Northern Ireland for a field study. I was studying at St. Mary conflict resolution. So we went there for a field study. And while we were sitting and having our fish and chips, he said, okay, I'm going to give you one advice and please keep it. He said, when you go back to San Antonio, please stay next to Ann Hanke. She is the true leader for Interfaith in San Antonio, and she is the one who will lead our city in that direction. And I, as one of your professor, your friend, I suggest you to stay with Ann Hanke. So 2014 changed my life that way. I know Ann Hanke before that, but after that years, I stay next to her, didn't stay in front of her. So, dear Ann Hanke, for your visionary leadership of the faith-based initiative and your tireless work to build compassion, connection, and community in San Antonio. Thank you.
And so with the gratitude of a city, we thank you both. Amen.
Thank you, everyone. You're all dismissed. You're free to go. Thank you.